Into the Poison Cloud. The Incredible Life of Garrett Morgan, Whose Inventions Have Saved Countless Lives, by Todd Olson. Garrett Morgan must have looked odd. He was standing on a platform in the middle of Lake Erie in his pajamas. A bulky hood was draped over his head and shoulders. Long tubes hung from the front of the hood like elephant trunks. But Morgan probably wasn't thinking about how he looked. It was July 25th, 1916. Hours earlier, a violent explosion had ripped through a tunnel deep under the lake. 24 men lay dying in a cloud of poisonous gas more than 100 feet below the platform on which Morgan stood. Several attempts to rescue them had failed. Now, Morgan was their only hope, and he was counting on his peculiar-looking hood to keep him alive. The safety hood, as he called it, was a breathing device that Morgan had invented. It filtered out the smoke and other toxic fumes while protecting the wearer from extreme heat. For years, Morgan had been waiting for the opportunity to show the world once and for all that it worked. This was his chance. He was going to prove it, or die trying. Leaving home. Garrett Morgan was born in Paris, Kentucky in 1877, 12 years after the Civil War ended. Both his parents had been born into slavery, and Morgan grew up during a time of great change in America. After slavery was abolished in the United States in 1865, newly emancipated men, women, and children were hopeful for the future. But in the decades that followed, racism and discrimination remained brutal facts of life. Many southern states passed laws that denied black people the right to vote or hold certain jobs. Black people were forced to use separate and inferior public facilities, including hospitals, libraries, and schools. These shameful laws and policies trapped many black people in poverty, including Morgan's family. In fact, although Morgan loved school, he had to quit after 6th grade to earn money for his family. Yet even without teachers or books, he continued to study the world around him. He was always taking things apart and putting them back together, just to figure out how they worked. Morgan had a gift he didn't want to waste: insatiable curiosity. But with few opportunities in the South, he knew he would have to leave Kentucky if he wanted to work with his mind. So, as a teen, he said goodbye to his family and headed north to Ohio. Morgan eventually settled in the city of Cleveland with nothing but a dime in his pocket and determination, says the granddaughter Sandra Morgan. He took a job sweeping floors at a factory that made clothes, curtains, toys, and other items. In his spare time, he taught himself how to repair the factory's sewing machines. Soon, he had invented a new way to keep the machines from breaking. His employer was so impressed that he promoted Morgan and paid him $150 for the idea, about $5,000 in today's money. By 1910, Morgan had become a successful business person, running his own tailoring shop with dozens of employees. With cash rolling in, he had time to devote to an invention the world desperately needed: a breathing device for firefighters. What he did protected firefighters. Fires were a deadly problem in cities in the early 1900s. In 1911, a fire broke out at the Triangle Waste Company factory in New York City, killing 146 people. The tragedy made it clear that America needed better laws, protections, and gear to fight fires. Garrett Morgan's safety hood would soon enable firefighters to stay in burning buildings longer and rescue more people. In the early 20th century, fires were a deadly menace in the U.S. Millions of people worked in crowded factories and lived in cramped apartment buildings where a single spark could ignite a raging inferno. Firefighters who attempted to rescue people trapped in burning buildings could easily suffocate from the smoke and fumes. Morgan wanted to prevent that and help firefighters save more lives. In 1912, after several years of tinkering in his workshop, he debuted his safety hood, an ingenious device that had the potential to change the way America fought fires. The safety hood fit over a firefighter's head and shoulders. 2 breathing tubes stretched from the hood to the floor. During a fire, smoke rises. The tubes enabled firefighters to breathe the cleanest air available, closest to the ground. Water-soaked sponges filtered out the fumes. Morgan knew he had an amazing product that could save many lives, but convincing people to buy it would be difficult. Nearly all his potential customers were white, and many were reluctant to do business with a black man. Morgan wasn't about to let that stop him, though. To market his breathing device, he would have to get creative. He hired white salesmen and organized demonstrations of his invention around the country. Often, he went along pretending to be an assistant. To show how the mask worked, Morgan and his salesmen would fill up a tent and fill it with toxic brew of burning tar, sulfur, formaldehyde, and manure. Morgan would put on the hood and step inside. Minutes later, he would emerge alive and unharmed. The smoke was the thickest and most evil-smelling imaginable, reported one newspaper after a demonstration in New Orleans. Incredibly, however, Morgan came out as good as new. Over time, Morgan continued to improve his invention. He added an airbag that provided a 15-minute supply of oxygen. Morgan's demonstrations proved that the mask worked. But could it get someone through a real rescue operation? In 1916, Morgan finally got the chance to find out. What he did improved sewing machines. At the beginning of the 1900s, factory workers churned out clothes on sewing machines. When the machines broke down, factories lost money. Garrett Morgan figured out a way to keep the machines running. Daring rescue. On July 24, 1916, 11 men were working on a tunnel intended to carry water from Lake Erie into Cleveland. Around 10 p.m., the workers struck a pocket of natural gas. The gas ignited, sending a cloud of poisonous fumes rocketing through the tunnel. Several groups of rescuers went in after the men, but most of them were soon overcome by the toxic gas. Now, at least 12 rescuers, plus the 11 workers, had passed out or died inside the tunnel. The phone call to Morgan came at 3 a.m. The fire department needed him. Now. Someone on the safety site had seen one of Morgan's safety hood demonstrations and remembered it. Morgan's invention was the only hope for the trapped men. If it worked, that is. Morgan didn't even have time to change out of his pajamas. He gathered as many safety hoods as he could. Balancing a jumble of tubes, he rushed to his car and drove to the shore. From there, he took a boat to the platform on the lake. On the platform, he stood surrounded by firefighters, police officers, and workers. Only 3 of them, including Morgan's brother, were willing to put on the hoods and go down into the tunnel with him. Before Morgan got into the elevator, Cleveland's mayor, Harry Davis, shook his hand. Davis said simply, "Goodbye," as though he did not expect to see Morgan again. Then, as the mayor and a small crowd watched anxiously, Morgan and the 3 volunteers disappeared into the elevator shaft. Minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. There was no sign of anyone. Had the hoods failed? Was everyone in the tunnel dead? Just when all hope seemed lost, the elevator sprang to life. Morgan and the 3 helpers stumbled out with 2 workers, one of whom was still alive. Morgan lost no time in going back down into the tunnel. It wasn't until his 3rd trip that more volunteers stepped forward from the crowd. They put on hoods and joined the rescue effort. In the end, they saved 2 men, who had Morgan's invention to thank for their lives. The incredible rescue was widely reported in newspapers, but frustratingly, Morgan did not always get the credit that he deserved. Many articles praised only the white men who had helped him. Still, Morgan's safety hood helped change the way fires were fought. Soon, fire departments across the country began reaching out to Morgan to purchase his amazing device. What he did made busy streets safer. In the 1820s, city streets were a mess of pedestrians, cars, horses, and trolleys. Grisly accidents were common. To make streets safer, Morgan invented a new traffic signal. The signal stopped vehicles in all directions before the signal changed to go. This reduced the risk of crashes and gave pedestrians a chance to safely cross the street. Morgan's legacy. A year later, Morgan found another use for his invention. In 1917, during World War I, U.S. troops were sent overseas to fight Germany, which was using poison gas as a weapon. A version of Morgan's hood, the gas mask, helped protect American troops from the gas when they went into battle. Morgan didn't stop there. He continued dreaming up new ways to solve problems. One day in Cleveland, he witnessed a girl suffer terrible injuries in a car crash caused by chaotic traffic. Morgan was again determined to help. Eventually, he came up with a new kind of traffic signal. It briefly stopped vehicles in all directions at busy intersections before the signal changed to go. The pause reduced the risk of accidents, making streets safer. After patenting his design, Morgan sold it to a major company called General Electric for $40,000. That's about $700,000 in today's money. By the time Morgan died in 1963, his inventions had helped millions of people. He was proud of everything he had accomplished with just a sixth-grade education. According to his granddaughter, Sandra Morgan, he never stopped learning. He hired tutors to teach him the things he never got to learn in school. He kept a giant stack of National Geographic magazines. Today, several schools in Cleveland are named after him. He is buried there in a cemetery along other important figures from American history, including President James Garfield and famous business person John D. Rockefeller. Says Sandra Morgan, "He knew you had to take the gifts you're given and use them to be your best." 6 Qualities of a Successful Inventor. Do you have what it takes? By Mackenzie Caro and Alessandra Potenza. 1. Problem solving. Inventors identify problems and come up with innovative solutions. Take Carlson Kropf, who wanted a skateboard that could fit in his backpack and locker. So he created the locker board, a skateboard that's shorter than regular boards but still easy to ride. 2. Passion. Inventors must be passionate about their work to help them stick with it. After all, they may need to build many prototypes to create a product that works. It took Aaron Morderick years of testing to make his colorful thinking putty. Today, this popular toy and stress reliever is sold around the world. 3. Resilience. Not all ideas work out, and inventors need to be able to accept failure, learn from it, and try again. Melanie Perkins, creator of the online design tool Canva, had her idea rejected more than 100 times before someone agreed to invest in it. 4. Curiosity. Inventors are always learning new things. Kevin Systrom, co-founder of Instagram, was interested in programming, so he taught himself to code in his spare time. Eventually, he was able to make his own app. 5. Creativity. Inventors see how many ideas can be applied in many ways. NASA engineer Lonnie Johnson often tinkered with his own inventions at home. One night, while working on a heat pump, he saw a new use for the project: play. It led him to dream up a new kind of water gun, the Super Soaker. 6. Courage. It takes guts to try something new. Just ask Gitanjali Rao. She invented Tethys, a device that detects lead in water which is toxic to humans. "I had never started an invention and stuck with it," she says. "I was always too afraid my idea wouldn't end up being successful. Now, I'm not afraid to try anymore." Writing contest. Think about the qualities described above. Which 3 do you think most contributed to Garrett Morgan's success? Answer this question in a well-organized essay. Use text evidence. Send your work to Garrett Morgan Contest. 3 winners will each get How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson.